what exactly is it that makes Florida Man act the way he does? What exactly causes him to commit some of the most bizarre, hilarious, and profane acts known to man? So much so that the entire concept has become internationally renowned. Is it the heat, the humidity, the close proximity to dangerous wildlife, or even wilder weather? It's a question that may never be answered, but what's clear is that a man certainly doesn't have to be born in Florida for that state's particular kind of madness to slip into their psyche. Which brings us to the case of the infamous Carl Tanzler, also known as the Key West necrophile. Carl Tanzler went by many names. Born on February 8, 1877 in Dresden, Germany, he was listed as George Tanzler on his German marriage certificate. Yet when he emigrated to the United States in 1926, he was listed as Carl Tanzler von Kossel, which some of his hospital records were signed Count Carl Tanzler. After a brief stop in Havana, Cuba, he settled in Zephyr Hills, Florida, where his sister had settled just a few years prior. In 1927, Carl was later joined by his family, consisting of his wife Doris and two young daughters, Ayesha and Clarissa. But Carl was unsatisfied in his married life, and later took a job as a radiology technician at the U.S. Marine Hospital in Key West, leaving his young family behind in Zephyr Hills. It was there he worked without incident for 3 years, until a young patient arrived at the hospital that changed his life forever. Ilana Milagro de Hoyos was a young Cuban-American woman who spent most of her life in Miami. But in April of 1930, Ilana complained of feeling unwell and, after seeing a doctor in Miami, was referred to the radiology department in Key West. Her appointment was scheduled for April 22nd, and it was that fateful day that brought her to first meeting with Carl Tanzler. The moment he laid eyes on her, Carl was smitten, and throughout the course of his initial examination of her, he found himself falling madly in love. Yet he was completely heartbroken to discover that Ilana was suffering from tuberculosis, a disease that was almost invariably fatal at the time of her diagnosis. Tanzler tried everything he could to save her life, using all of his medical knowledge along with a variety of treatments, medicines, X-ray, and electrical equipment, some of which he personally transported to Ilana's home. In the last days of her life, Carl showered Ilana with gifts. He brought her flowers, jewelry, clothes, and chocolates, each time declaring his undying love for her. It could have been the case that he believed that such affection would give her the will to fight her affliction, but his efforts, both personally and professionally, proved to be in vain. On October 25, 1931, Ilana de Hoyos died of tuberculosis at her parents' Key West home. Carl Tanzler paid for her funeral and then sought permission from her family to have a lavish above-ground mausoleum built in a Key West cemetery. The family was bemused by his unrequited adoration for their young daughter, but did not refuse the request. And so, Tanzler essentially had a shrine constructed to Ilana, one that he visited almost every night for 2 years, weeping openly at her gravesite as he mourned the loss of the love of his life. But Tanzler's love for Ilana, combined with his deep, boundless sense of loss, twisted and distorted his grief into something much darker. And in April of 1933, he made the decision to do something that would haunt Florida folklore for almost 100 years. In the dead of night, Tanzler crept through the Key West cemetery, pushing a small wooden wagon in front of him. He arrived at the mausoleum where Ilana was interred and broke the seal on her tomb with a hammer and chisel. Undeterred by the stench of death that greeted him, Tanzler wrapped her body in a sheet, placed it on the cart, and then pushed it all the way back to his home. He was undoubtedly driven mad with grief, later saying that Alana's spirit would appear to him as he wept by her gravesite, singing her favorite Spanish language song to him before giving him permission to take her body from the grave so her spirit could occupy his home and be closer to him as a result. When he arrived home, Tanzler took Alana's skeleton and attached the bones together with piano wire. He had also taken the time to pick out a pair of glass eyes with irises of the same brown shade that Alana had, slotting them into her and gluing them into place. Since Alana's skin had rotted away over the 2 years she had been buried, Tanzler went about replacing it, using a mix of silk cloth that had been soaked in plaster of Paris and wax. Somehow, Tanzler had also managed to collect a sizable amount of hair from Alana's mother. Although there are no records of exactly how he did this, he apparently had a large enough collection to be able to create an extremely lifelike wig out of it, which he then attached to Alana's lifeless skull. He also stuffed the corpse's chest and abdominal cavities with rags to maintain the integrity of her body's shape while in life. Once his amateur version of human taxidermy was completed, Tanzler dressed up his morbid project in some of the jewelry he had bought her, slid stockings onto the legs, and pulled gloves over the hands. He then applied a large amount of disinfectants, preserving agents, and perfume to slow the rate of decomposition and mask the rotten smell that emanated from his beloved Alana. When he was done, Tanzler took the body to bed with him. It wasn't long before employees at the Key West cemetery discovered that Alana de Hoyo's body was missing. They raised the alarm, telling police that the most likely culprit was Carl Tanzler. Yet Tanzler straight up denied the accusations, and despite being the main suspect in the corpse robbing, he managed to convince the investigating officers that he would be the last person to desecrate the lavish tomb he himself had paid so handsomely for. But as time went on, rumors abounded. Terrifying rumors that were only reinforced when a neighbor was said to have witnessed Tanzler dancing around his front room with an inanimate figure. It was instantly assumed to be the deceased Alana, and word soon reached her sister Florinda. It took her until October of 1940 to build up the courage to confront him. Tanzler arrogantly invited Florinda into his home, and after trying and failing to belay her concerns, she searched his house herself. She burst into his bedroom and was confronted with a scene of pure horror. The visage was rough, the form distorted, but the resemblance and the smell was enough to confirm her worst fears. The Tanzler had stolen her sister's body and reconstructed it in a sickening parody of her former self. She ran from the house and straight to the local police department, informing them that she had seen her sister's corpse in Tanzler's home with her own eyes. Police arrived at the property with a search warrant, arresting and detaining Tanzler when they too discovered the hauntingly morbid scene that greeted them in the bedroom. It was initially believed that he was simply insane, and therefore unfit to stand trial, but after a psychological examination, the heartbroken radiologist was found to be mentally competent and was subsequently charged with wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without proper authorization. On October 8, 1940, a preliminary hearing was held at the Monroe County Courthouse in Key West. Tanzler faced the full set of charges, but unbelievably, they were completely dropped when Tanzler's lawyer correctly asserted that the statute of limitations for grave robbing had, in fact, expired, since the crime had been committed over 7 years prior. To the general public's deep shock and horror, Tanzler was released from custody. After the corpse was seized by the relevant authorities, physicians marveled at Tanzler's ad hoc attempt at amateur taxidermy. His methods were crude and shoddy, but somehow effective. However, they did make an alarming and disturbing discovery upon further examination of the corpse. There was evidence that Tanzler had committed necrophilia with Alana's body. Two physicians, Dr. DePue and his colleague Dr. Foraker, who had attended the 1940 autopsy of Alana's remains, recalled in 1972 in an interview that a vaginal tube had been inserted into the pelvic region of the corpse, and pathologists made the bizarre decision to place the corpse on display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home. where it was visited and viewed by several thousand morbidly curious Floridians. After a brief stint as an exhibit, Alana's body was eventually returned to Key West Cemetery, where, instead of being reinterred in the expensive, opulent mausoleum, it was buried in an unmarked grave, the location of which remained a closely guarded secret for many, many years to prevent Tanzler from stealing it again. And there's no doubt that, after putting in such hard work to restore his lost love, he would try once again to be reunited with her. The details surrounding the case made it perhaps the most infamous case of grave robbing that the modern world has ever seen. Publications such as the Miami Herald and the Key West Citizen obsessed over the story, pumping out headlines that generated a huge amount of interest in the state of Florida, as well as all over the rest of the United States. The general public was gripped by the ins and outs of such a sensational case, but bizarrely, instead of viewing Tanzler as the monster that he was, Americans mostly regarded him as something of an eccentric romantic. Later in 1944, Carl Tanzler relocated to Pasco County, close to his former home of Zephyr Hills, where his estranged wife Doris lived. It was there that in 1947 he wrote an autobiography, one that was commissioned for the pulp magazine Fantastic Adventures. The account of his morbid and perverted misadventures was his only source of income, since he could not find any medical work due to his infamy, and in his twilight years he was fully supported by his apparently forgiving wife. What's just as unbelievable is that, despite all he had done, 1950 saw Tanzler actually receive United States citizenship in Tampa. And what's more, Tanzler's obsession with Alana had not been sated. It was in Tampa that he used a death mask taken from Alana's face in the moments after her death to create a life-size recreation of his deceased lover, living with a woman-sized doll until his eventual death in 1952 at the ripe old age of 75. Some say that Tanzler's dead body was found wrapped up in the arms of his morbid creation, and that he died in the embrace of Alana's effigy, only too happy to join her in eternity. But there are some who even claim that Tanzler secretly had the bodies switched, so that when he passed away, he did so while in the grip of the real Alana's corpse. Regardless of the final truth of the matter, we can safely conclude that Carl Tanzler was a dangerously insane person, one that had showed no signs of madness until he had graced the shores of the Sunshine State. So as the question remains, what is it that makes a Florida man act the way he does? Perhaps in Carl Tanzler's case, it was something deep in the psychosphere that seeped into his consciousness, something that made a harmless infatuation morph into something truly disturbing and haunting. And perhaps it is this same toxic presence that continues to infect the minds of Florida's population, both male and female, even to this day. Although, you'll soon come to learn that grave robbing extends way beyond the shores of America and can reach a level of depravity unlike anything you can imagine. Who you're looking at here is a man named Anatoli Moskvvin, a man famous in Russian academic circles for his stellar work in the study of linguistics, with his fellow scholars often referring to him as a genius. Yet despite his reluctance to socialize and open up to them, his peers were aware that Anatoly had some far more eccentric interests, such as his extensive collection of life-sized dolls. They had no idea why Anatoly procured such curious-looking dolls, but as the truth of his unusual collection was brought to light, it proved to be far more horrifying than anyone could have possibly imagined. In 2005, a local publisher by the name of Oleg Ryabov sought to catalog the occupants of over 700 cemeteries around Nizhny Novgorod. When Oleg asked his colleagues who the right man for the job would be, all referred him to Anatoly as a meticulous self-styled necropolist who would pour himself into such a task, and they were right. Over the next 18 months, Anatoly worked for up to 19 hours a day, visiting exactly 752 cemeteries across the region. some of which were inaccessible to motor vehicles. He sometimes walked for almost 20 miles a day, drinking from puddles and sleeping in the cemeteries themselves in order to keep up with his massive workload. Yet as time went by, it seemed his motivation to work so hard was far from innocent. On a number of different occasions, Anatoli's visits to certain cemeteries coincided with incidents of grave robbing. But despite being questioned by police several times, his academic credentials and purported purposes saved him from arrest or detainment. To paint a more intimate picture of his character, the police got in touch with the editor-in-chief of a publication which Anatoli regularly contributed to. This editor told them that Anatoli definitely had certain quirks, but that he was a consummate professional and that he would never bring himself to partake in any kind of grave robbing. Despite the editor's claims, Anatoli remained on the police's list of probable suspects, and by late 2011, a total of 26 corpses, most of them belonging to children, had been stolen from cemeteries that he'd visited while working for Oleg. When dozens of other suspects were rolled out during the investigation, Anatoli once again became the case's prime suspect, and on November 2nd of that year, police raided the apartment he shared with his elderly parents. During the course of their search, officers found numerous souvenirs that Anatoli had taken from various gravestones, such as metal nameplates or mementos that had been left by the grieving relatives of the deceased. Yet the gravity of the situation only became clear when officers uncovered a collection of photographs and videos depicting open graves and disinterred bodies, along with instructions for making what Anatoli seemed to refer to as dolls. To their horror, the police realized that Anatoli's collection weren't dolls at all. In reality, all 26 dolls in his collection were dead bodies he had embalmed and decorated to appear as such. When it became obvious that he was facing a lengthy prison sentence, Anatoli began cooperating with investigators and admitted to making the dolls over the course of the previous decade, desecrating up to 150 graves in the process. He also asserted that his elderly parents were completely unaware of what he was doing, and that he only created new dolls when they were staying with relatives for at least a week or so. Following an extensive psychiatric evaluation, Anatoli was determined to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and after being declared mentally unfit to stand trial, he was ordered to undergo what a judge referred to as coercive medical measures in lieu of a jail sentence. After 3 years of being detained in a Russian psychiatric clinic, a spokesman stated that it is absolutely clear that Anatoli Moskvvin is not mentally fit for trial and will therefore remain here for indefinite psychiatric treatment. The announcement followed a series of highly disturbing interviews in which Anatoli explained his motives and techniques with a team of mental health professionals. Anatoli stated that he felt a great sympathy for departed children and believed that they could be brought back to life by either science or black magic. He claimed that, as an expert in Celtic culture, he'd learned that the ancient druids slept on graves in order to communicate with spirits of their dead. He also claimed to be inspired to create his collection of dolls after studying the culture of indigenous Siberians, in particular, the ancient Yakuts, who had a similar method of communicating with their deceased relatives. Once he had decided to begin his collection, Anatoli stated that he began reading through the obituaries of recently deceased children. When he found an obituary that appealed to him, he would then sleep on the child's grave. Then, in the dreams that he had while sleeping on the ground that they were buried in, he claimed that he would ask them if they wanted to be brought back to life. If they said no, he would leave them to rest in peace. But if they said yes, he would dig up their bodies before transporting them back to his apartment to be turned into a doll. Despite claiming that he had only been making his dolls for around a decade, he later admitted that he'd been grave robbing for more than 20 years. In the beginning, he never dug up a grave without the permission of the child within. But as he grew older, and it became physically painful for him to sleep on the graves, he began taking the bodies home where it would be more comfortable to sleep near them. Following the exhumation of the children's corpses, Anatoli began researching various mummification techniques in an attempt to find the most effective way to preserve their bodies. He settled on, at first, drying the corpses using a combination of salt and baking soda, before storing the bodies in a secure, dry place in and around cemeteries. Once the corpses were properly desiccated, Anatoli then transported them back to his apartment, where he used various methods to turn them into dolls. According to him, this was in order to give the children functional bodies that they could use when he eventually discovered a way to bring them back to life, since their physical remains were too decomposed and hideous for them to feel contentment in undeath. Since he was unable to prevent the bodies from growing brittle and shrinking as they dried, Anatoli would wrap the limbs in strips of cloth. He also stuffed the children's body cavities with rags and padding to give them shape, all before adding wax masks decorated with nail polish over the faces. To complete the process, Anatoli would dress his victims in brightly colored children's clothing before fashioning wigs for them. It's these final details which gave the corpses the appearance of life-sized homemade dolls, a facade which allowed him to continuously operate for 2 decades without drawing any suspicion. Anatoli later told psychologists that he was well aware that what he was doing was against the law, but disagreed with the suggestion that it was morally wrong. He claimed that the dead children were calling out to be rescued, and believed that resurrecting those who had had their lives snatched away at such an early age was infinitely more important than adhering to society's idea of decency and respect. Anatoli also told psychologists that he longed to be a father, and once had an adoption application rejected on the grounds that his income was too small. The rejection only fueled his desire to create some kind of substitute, but Anatoli claimed that he had no idea how to do so until he was offered the cemetery cataloging job, which served as inspiration for his grisly pursuit. Anatoli was quick to vehemently deny that there was any carnal motivations behind his creation of the dolls, and insisted his interest in the children was purely parental. He claimed to sing nursery rhymes and lullabies to them, and even threw each one a small party on their birthdays. But no matter how much Anatoli insisted that his intentions were pure, it's clear that his actions were far beyond the pale of decency. Perhaps Anatoli wasn't the monster that the Russian media initially made him out to be. Perhaps a better word to describe him would be ghoulish. But there's no doubt that a special corner of hell should be reserved for those who disturb the remains of children, when they're better left to rest in peace.
Hey friends, thanks so much for watching. Just a quick heads up, I release new videos every second Tuesday at 7 p.m. EST. Also check out my main channel, Let's Read, where you can hear longer compilations of interesting, scary stories just like these. And if you prefer audio only, feel free to check out the Let's Read podcast, located anywhere you listen to podcasts, all linked in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you in the next one.